Welcome to the Blue Security Podcast, a weekly podcast for information security defenders, where we bring you discussions on best practices, tools, and implementation for enterprise security. Now, here are your hosts for today's show, Andy Jha and Adam Brewer.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Blue Security Podcast. I'm Andy, your host.
I'm Adam, your co-host.
We have two topics that we wanted to talk about today. The first one is Agent 365. This is the new dashboard that will monitor all the agents in the Microsoft estate. So we'll dive into that because it's generally available now. And then also we want to talk about MDash, which is a new vulnerability scanner that's actually multi-model from Microsoft. And so two really cool things that are coming out, both AI-based and fueled by AI. So before we get started, since we are going to be talking about Microsoft, we'll go through our standard disclaimer.
Andy and I both work for Microsoft in our field security sales. We record the show outside of work. As I say this, it's a Sunday night. It's almost 8 o'clock at night, so definitely outside of work hours. And we self-fund the show. Everything from our domain to our recording platform and everything in between comes out of our pockets. We don't take sponsorship. We don't have any ad revenue. Truly a labor of love. And so the opinions and attitudes you're about to hear expressed are those of Adam Brewer and Andy Jha, and do not necessarily reflect those of Microsoft Corporation.
All right. And with that, let's dive into it here. So I'm sure you've heard about AI agents because that's the new buzzword. Last year was all about just LLMs and AI, and this year it's about these agents. And so we have agents in Microsoft Copilot and Teams and M365, but also there's other SaaS agents that are getting connected to sensitive data, local autonomous agents that are running directly on devices. You know, we did a whole show on OpenClaw and on why those, and that's just one example. There's a bunch of them that people are running as well. And so the core problem for defenders is that these agents proliferate really fast and they span across apps, endpoints, and the cloud. And they often operate completely outside of the visibility of the teams that are responsible for managing that risk, the security teams. Microsoft Agent 365 is really designed specifically for that purpose. It's to help organizations take control and see that visibility of that agent sprawl. It serves as that control plane to observe, govern, and secure agents and their interactions. And that includes agents built with Microsoft AI and agents from eco partner systems as well. So using the admin and security flows that teams are already using within Five. So some of the key capabilities of Agent 365 is that they cover agents whether they act on behalf of the user with delegated access, like, for example, an agent that helps employees organize their inbox, but it also does it with agents that operate with their own credentials and scope of work, such as like an agent that autonomously triages like support tickets or something like that. One of the main focuses of Agent 365 is shadow AI. Unmanaged agents that are quietly spreading. Users are installing agents like, OpenClaw, Claude Code on their devices and then adapting SaaS agents built on these platforms. Many of these run unmanaged and outside of traditional governance. And they're doing things like autonomously executing tasks, modifying code, accessing confidential information. And so to address this, Microsoft Defender and Intune will be able to discover and manage local AI agents running on Windows devices, starting with OpenClaw agents and then expanding to other widely used agents like GitHub Copilot CLI and Claude Code. And then security teams will be able to see which devices these agents are running on, get like an asset context map showing connected MCP servers and cloud resources those identities can reach. And then you can apply policy-based controls to block those unmanaged agents. And then beyond like the local agents that we're talking about here, Agent 365 can also extend network controls to Microsoft Copilot Studio agents and agents running on endpoints, including local agents. So these controls can help you identify unsanctioned AI usage and then restrict connections to only the approved web destinations, filter like any type of risky file movements, and also you can help block malicious prompt-based attacks before they lead to like any harmful actions for your organization. Out of the box, there's going to be a few integrations, and I'm sure there's going to be more coming, right? So right from the start, Agent 365 registry will be able to sync with AWS Bedrock and Google Cloud Connections is entering private preview. And then it also allows IT teams to automatically discover, inventory, and perform basic lifecycle governance, like stopping, starting, and deleting agents across these multi-cloud platforms. And then on the SaaS side, there's a whole eco partner agents that are going to be fully configured to be managed by Agent 365, like GenSpark. I haven't heard of some of these before. So ZenSci, Ignite, and Zendesk, which I've heard of course. And then agents that are built on platforms like Core, N8N, Casto. Yeah, just to name a few.
Or to try.
Yeah. And then organizations can also observe and govern these agents in the Agent 365 control plane with no integration work required from IT or security teams. Another thing is that Windows 365 for agents is also entering public preview, and that provides a secure managed environment for agents to carry out work. It's a new class of cloud PCs purposely built for agentic workloads, managed in Intune, and allowing agents to run in a policy-controlled environment with the same identity, security, and management controls that are already being used for your employees. From a licensing standpoint, it's available in the new M365 that Adam and I talked about a few weeks back. So if you missed that, go and review that show. You can also purchase it as a standalone product at $15 per user per month. That's the retail price. And then it's per user or an individual who manages and sponsors an agent specifically or uses agents to do the work on their behalf. So any agent activity is going to be covered as long as you're licensing per user. So yeah, this is now all generally available. And one of the things, again, kind of near and dear to my heart, if you work in the government, a lot of things are slower. And this was one of the things that is slower. Roadmap wise, we are, hopefully getting this sometime in FY27, Microsoft's fiscal year is kind of where engineering is kind of looking at that. So hopefully sometime very soon in the future, the Gov Cloud with Microsoft will also get this.
So fingers crossed, maybe sometime in the next 13, 14 months.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So Agent 365, Microsoft really has a strong point of view on agent security. And I think a lot of security vendors are having to put a point of view out there into the world. And Microsoft says that you should secure agents like humans, like human identities, like human behavior. And I think that sounds right, because how we've typically secured machine-based workloads up until this point has not at all been like how we secure humans. And that's partly because machines up until this point only ran in a deterministic nature. They only did what they were directly programmed to do, and that's it. There wasn't any randomness or creativity to them. The same input delivered the same output every time. Well, agents aren't like that. We know all of AI is non-deterministic. You can give the same input, the same prompt, and you'll get a different output. That's much closer to how humans behave. So the way to think about Agent 365, Andy, you'd spent a lot of time talking about the dashboard, but I really want to open your aperture on this a little bit as you think about it. If Microsoft 365 E5 is the security platform to secure all your human users, Agent 365 is the platform to secure all your agents. So it's not just a dashboard in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. It actually unlocks a whole bunch of capabilities across Entra, Purview, and the Defender suites that are agent-specific capabilities. So one example, Andy and I love talking about conditional access. We talk about it on the show all the time. It's a feature of Entra ID. Think of it like an if this, then that model, where you're building a policy that says, if this happens, then take this action for each login. Well, you can do that for agents, but it is specifically tuned and designed for agent behavior. Agents move a lot faster than humans. So if we applied a human-based conditional access policy to an agent, they would almost certainly flag it. It would look suspicious. because humans don't work that way. But for an agent, it could be very normal. There's nothing unusual about it. And so there are conditional access, like risk-based conditional access policies tuned for agents. And the way you unlock that capability is by purchasing Agent 365. So it's not just a dashboard, it's a whole suite of capabilities, security capabilities to secure agents across the Entra, Purview, and Defender suites. The other thing I want to point out, because there's been a little bit of, I wouldn't say confusion, but maybe help me understand kind of questions from customers on the licensing model. Andy mentions the licensing model is human-based. That's correct. You license per human heartbeat. And any human that interacts with agents in any way, whether you are sponsoring them, whether you manage an agent, whether you just interact with them and use them to help get your work done, needs an Agent 365 license. Here's why, in my opinion. Again, not speaking on behalf of Microsoft, as the disclaimer said, speaking on behalf of Adam. If you made the licensing model per agent, what you are now doing is creating a tax on creativity. You're creating a tax on users trying to find ways agents can help improve their work, speed up their work. If you do it per human, then it scales as many agents as you can theoretically do. Now, there are, of course, service limits. There's going to be a high end where you may get a note from your Microsoft account team that says, hey, we need to talk. You're doing too many agents here. But for the most part, the idea is if Andy thinks of a great idea for a new agent, there shouldn't be an organizational tax that says, well, that's another $15. The Microsoft taxman shows up and says, pay me more money because Andy thought of a great idea and wants to try it out. So that's not the model. The model is Andy's already got a license, whether he has 5 agents or 15 agents working on his behalf, 30 agents. It's the same per user fee. We pay for Andy's heartbeat, not the heartbeat of the agents. So that's why that exists. It's actually designed to enable organizations to have predictable pricing, even as we fully expect their agent populations to proliferate. Like that fight in the Matrix where all the agent Smiths came at Neo. Hopefully they're not doing that to your security defenses, but you see how the agents can proliferate. We don't want to prevent that. We want to allow those to grow in your environment and help you get things done and be more productive. And so I think that's the philosophy and why the pricing model is the way it is, because of the things I talked about and wanting to encourage that innovation and growth. And then finally, closing thought on Agent 365 before we move on. I've been selling Microsoft security for over probably about 9.5 years now. And one of the most common misconceptions I fight is that Microsoft security is only good for securing Microsoft. So it's only good if you're Windows PCs and you're running workloads in Azure and you're in M365, and it's not helpful outside of that. Well, Agent 365 is completely designed around industry standard capabilities, things like MCP servers, which is an industry standard, and there's an observability standard that it follows, and it has an open API that is open to all other agentic vendors that can create automatic registration of new agents created in their platform and registering them in Agent 365 and Entra Agent ID automatically. It's intended to be open. Our arms are open and welcome to all comers because, as we always say, cybersecurity is a team sport. And so the intent is not to create some closed off proprietary platform. It's the opposite. It wants to be the platform for all agents. Now, to be fair, if customers come up to me today and say, well, does this do all my agents? It could, if your other companies wanted to play ball. Now, of course, as anything in technology, some people want to go it alone. They don't want to play well with others. They want to take their ball and go home. We can't make them not, but we can certainly open our arms and our hearts and our door to them. And there's an open API published and allowing any and all to come play in the Agent 365 sandbox at any time. So that's my closing thoughts on that for today, but definitely something to start to look at and evaluate. I'm sure you're getting your leadership knocking on your door saying, hey, what's our strategy? What's our plan? How are we going to secure agents? I think it's a darn good solution. I know there's a lot of other darn good solutions out there too. And I know there's a lot of innovation happening right now, and it's an exciting space. So stay tuned. More to come on this from Microsoft and a lot of great competitors. It's an exciting time in our industry. I think we've talked about comparing this to the explosive growth early days of the iPhone and Android phones and smartphones in general. It feels like we're in that next hyper development phase of technology. And those are fun times to live through, even if they're a little stressful and a little tiresome as we pass through them. But at the time, it's exciting to be riding that tidal wave.
All right. So our next story is I want to talk about MDash, which is Microsoft's new multi-model agentic scanning harness. And so, we've talked about Cloud Mythos, and I'm sure you've read some news on Cloud Mythos as well. And then OpenAI came out with GPT security, and then Cloud came out with Opus, which the new Opus model also kind of implemented some of the Mythos stuff in there. And so these models are getting better and better. And so what Microsoft has done is they've really announced a major step forward in this whole scanning, kind of vulnerability scanning, code scanning. So the code name is called MDash, and it's built by Microsoft's autonomous code security team. What MDash is, it's a source code vulnerability scanner. So it's not like a device or endpoint scanner, like a vulnerability, like looking at the vulnerabilities on my endpoint or software. It's code. And so what it's designed to scan like software code bases and then find exploitable security bugs before attackers do. It's an AI powered security auditing, really is what it is. What is particularly challenging for Microsoft is that there's a large surface for security auditing. Windows, Hyper-V, Azure, device drivers, service ecosystems, and all of them are private Microsoft code bases that are not part of any commodity language model training corpus, or they're also like genuinely hard to reason about, like kernel calling conventions, IRP and lock invariants, IPC trust boundaries, component internal idioms that there's no like pattern to match. And so on the surface, really a model has to actually reason over this stuff. And unlike a single model approach orchestrates more than 100 specialized AI agents across an assembly of frontier and distilled models to discover and debate and then prove exploitable bugs end to end. The pipeline works in a structured stage. It ingests the source code target and then builds language aware indices, then draws attack surfaces and threat models by analyzing past commits. Specialized auditor agents then run over the candidate code paths, emitting candidate findings with hypothesis and evidence. And then a second cohort of agents called debaters will then argue for and against each finding, reachability and exploitability. And then finally, approve stage constructs and executes, triggering inputs where the bug class admits it, dynamically validating the vulnerability is real and triggerable. So that's pretty cool because it's multiple different models. And like, as I'm reading this, it's like it debates it amongst itself and then puts it out and then proves it. And so,
Yeah, I like the language there. There's auditor agents, there's debater agents, there's prover agents. That's very interesting.
yeah.
The pipeline there.
And so the results really are pretty fascinating. MDash has found 21 of 21 planted vulnerabilities with 0 false positives on a private test driver, achieved 96% recall against 5 years of confirmed MSRC cases in the CLFS-sys and 100% in the TCPIP.sys, and then scored an industry-leading 88.45% on the public CyberGym benchmark of 1,507 real world vulnerabilities, which is the top score on the leaderboard. Using MDash on Microsoft's own Windows networking and authentication stack, researchers have found 16 new vulnerabilities, including 4 critical remote code execution flaws in components such as the Windows kernel TCP stack and the Ike v2 service. These bugs were patched on the May 2026 patch Tuesday. So MDash is already running in production and it's already feeding the vulnerabilities into Microsoft's own remediation pipeline.
Let me jump in there real quick. And Andy, we talked about this in the pre-show, and we'll put a link in the show notes. The Microsoft Security Research Center, MSRC, put out a blog post that said, hey, this patch Tuesday looks a little different, May 2026, than you've seen in the past. First off, the number of fixes is higher than typical for a hot patch month. May is a hot patch month. If you're running Windows hot patch, no reboot required. And they fully admitted and said, hey, and this was published around the same day as the article you're talking about, Andy, that talked about the new MDash capability. It said, yes, a lot of these vulnerabilities are now coming from AI vulnerability scanners. and AI vulnerability findings. However, the good news is for our listeners, we always talk about what's the takeaway for listeners. The MSRC blog effectively says the takeaway is keep doing what you're doing. Keep patching, keep doing your timely patches, invest in Windows Auto Patch, Windows Hot Patch, make sure you're deploying them as quickly as you possibly can while validating them before you deploy broadly, and all the things that our listeners already do well today. Nothing has changed in terms of we're not moving away from the Patch Tuesday cadence that's predictable, understandable, everyone knows it. And the bar for out of band patches has not changed either. And that's going to maintain the same bar as well. So, although how they're discovered may be changing and may be more AI driven in the future, human driven reporting will still really matter. And how it gets fixed and deployed is staying exactly the same. So, that's the good news. The takeaway for our listeners is you don't have to do anything different. You're just going to get patches, and maybe for the next couple of months, there'll be more of them. For a while, I talked on the previous week about a tidal wave of vulnerability fixes coming out, and that may continue for a while, but ultimately we will get to a better state. So the good news is MDash is already being run against the Windows private code base. It's already finding vulnerabilities and they are being patched. And by the way, in the May 2026 Patch Tuesday release, there were no known actively exploited vulnerabilities in the wild. Now, there was an Exchange one 2 days later, we talked about on last week's show. However, in Patch Tuesday, with the stuff MDash found, it found stuff that, as far as we know, no one was actively exploiting. So you had the chance for it to be found, discovered, and patched before there was any sign that anyone was taking advantage of those vulnerabilities. So that's the great news. We are currently moving faster than attackers, and hopefully that. Anyhow, that's a little side note there, but as you were talking about how MDash contributed to May Patch Tuesday, I thought that was a great time to jump in, and we will, of course, link that MSRC blog in the show notes. It's worth your review, just understanding what has and hasn't changed.
And as far as availability, this is not just an internal tool. Microsoft is making it available for organizations to scan their own code base. It's right now being tested by a small set of customers as part of a limited private preview. And so I'll talk about like how to get involved in that. But what I do want to just touch on is that it's really important to highlight the fact that MDash is multi-model. And I don't know if I really hammered that point, but this is not just a single model like Claude Mythos or GPT Security. It's multiple models, multiple frontier languages, multiple distilled models. And that matters because single models will miss things. I was explaining this to someone, a coworker recently, because they asked, well, why does a multi-model matter? Why is this anything that to really get excited about? And I kind of used the example of maybe you have someone who's using Proofpoint or Mimecast as their email security gateway. Well, guess what? You can still use Defender for Office behind that, and Defender for Office will catch things that the initial tool will miss. That's just part of it. Same thing is that like some people I know customers use Defender for Office and then they use something like Abnormal, like an API security. And so, like those two things work together. Or another example would be like CrowdStrike with MDE. Like you can use those side by side and kind of get more coverage and like kind of peer review. And speaking of peer review, I think I don't know if I mentioned this on the show, but like Copilot Researcher, when I use Copilot Researcher to write a paper today, if I need to write a white paper for something, because the military, the government's really big on white papers, so I have to generate these white papers. I can just toss it into a researcher, but what it does is it actually uses GPT 5.5 to write the initial white paper, and then it peer reviews it using Claude, which is really cool. So, and then like it kind of like reviews it and spits it out. And so this is kind of that thing where it's like there's multiple different models. Some of them review, some of them, will look at the initial vulnerability, the chaining of different vulnerabilities together to get an exploit. A single model may think of one thing, a different model may think of another. And then they have this whole like pipeline of auditor agents and reviewer agents and all that. And so there's a couple of concrete, real world examples that are in the blog. We'll link the blog for you to go and look at it because they're really interesting.
Mhm.
But I just wanted to highlight the whole like multi-model because this is kind of a new thing that is evolving. We're seeing it in certain things like Copilot Researcher. We're seeing it now with specifically in security with this MDash. And I think this is going to be a growing thing because it's one model is probably not going to be the end all be all. Different models are trained on different data. And so like having this kind of peer review system of two different AIs or multiple different AI systems is going to be really critical for the future in security.
Yeah, I agree. You provided two great examples of multi-model use cases in other scenarios. I just think we're in a moment right now as we record this in May 2026. Anthropic's having a moment, right? And as I talk to a lot of customers, they are the hotness right now. But you think of it wasn't that long ago that OpenAI was clearly the darling and everyone else was playing catch up. And the thought was, oh, Google is doomed. They're too late. The Google lost the plot. And then they came out with some amazing Gemini releases, especially a lot of the Gemini 3 releases, and Google was the hotness for a minute. The fact is, I think it's pretty clear today that no one is likely to develop an enduring moat in models. And so if you partner with a model provider, you're locking yourself into that one that at the moment may be ahead, may fall behind, may be in the middle. It's clearly a back and forth race. So having a multi-model experience where you can access many of them all at once seems kind of like the right approach moving forward. It's hard to predict, and maybe I'm going to sound stupid 6 months from now, but as it sits today in May 2026, my best sense of it has been watching each of the horses gain the lead for a bit and then relinquish the lead. Just because Anthropic has it at the moment doesn't mean they won't give it up. And you talked about, Andy, it's not just whether the model's the most state of the art or the best. It's just having them reason over it from different pathways and different perspectives and comparing notes in the way this model works, and then leveraging distilled models that are very specific and bespoke. You're just going to find things a single model cannot. And so there's a lot of benefits to this approach. And so I think as you go forward, not just for security use cases, but for your productivity use cases. And of course I'm biased. You know who pays my paycheck. We don't hide it on this show. I do think the most effective solution is going to be who delivers the wrapper, the harness. As we talk about with MDash, the H in it stands for harness. The harness is that's kind of the cool part right now. That's where all the innovation is how can you harness all these different models and agents together and give them a scaffolding and a framework to work within to deliver a result. And that's where things get the most interesting today. And we'll see how this evolves over time. But yeah, this is very, very cool stuff. Are you going to talk a little bit more about the public or the private preview
Mhm.
and the way to nominate yourself?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, just ending up on final thought here on the M dash is that it is in limited private preview. You can go and sign up at aka.ms/AI driven scanning harness. And so when you go to that, there's a form that you have to fill out. Now, this is part of the security advisors program. And I know that we've kind of briefly touched on that program, but it's actually a really cool program that any customer can kind of be a part of, and you have to like apply and fill out something. But when you're in that program, you get like specific updates on products and roadmaps. You get to interact with engineering teams. You can engage in like customer to customer learnings, provide feedback to the engineering teams as well. And then you get to learn about what's all upcoming, including these private previews. And so, there's a security advisors program in general, and then this particular one is just for this M dash private preview. But it's worth looking at the whole program because there's other things that you can be a part of within that program. But yeah, you just go to that aka.ms short link. Again, it's aka.ms/AI driven scanning harness. Of course, we'll put it in the show notes with the blog article as well. And you can go and fill out the form, nominate yourself, and hopefully someone will reach out to you. And if you get approved and onboarded into the private preview.
One thing we're pointing out with this private preview and something to consider before you race off and go put in your application is Microsoft is looking for customers who want to be design partners. in designing the future of this product. Obviously, the intent is to productize this and sell this moving forward. But right now, we want to co-develop with our customers to make sure this hits the mark. And so the expectation is not that you would be a passive tester, where we just send you a thing and you test it and don't ever provide any feedback, but you are an active design partner. And so there's a commitment of making available 6 or 7 people on your team, joining regular hour-long meetings a couple times a week to provide feedback and input and development. So it's a big commitment on your part to participate in this. I've been fortunate to test some pre-release hardware for Microsoft, and it's a significant commitment to install new builds and to provide bug test reports and sentiment surveys and everything else we do. This is similar. There is an active expectation to participate. And so if you're up for the challenge and you want to be part of bringing something to market that's very rewarding, by all means, please go throw in an app. But if you just want to get access to the cool thing to say you have it before someone else and not really sure how you test it or how it would fit in your org, you may want to wait for this to enter public preview, and in which case there won't be that same commitment required to move forward with it. So just want to call that out, and something to think about in general, not just for testing this, but if you want to test anything, true testing is a commitment, and it's not all fun and games. And sometimes you're using something that doesn't work right, and you got to get to the bottom of it and help reproduce it and provide those reproduction steps so it can be fixed moving forward. Just something to think about, but very, very cool. Amazing to get a chance to get hands-on with a product that is already impacting Patch Tuesday. And you think of the over 1 billion Windows devices that are getting those patches and getting those fixes, and this is helping influence that. That's pretty darn cool. So I think really exciting times ahead and exciting to see where this goes.
And that's our show for this week. Thanks for watching and listening. As always, our contact information will be in the show notes along with the links to the articles that we used for our discussion. If you have any questions or topics you want us to talk about in the future, just email us. Thanks. We'll talk to you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to the Blue Security Podcast. Please check out the show notes, catch up on episodes you may have missed, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Find Andy on Twitter @AJaw0 and Adam @AJ Brewer. See you at our next episode.